Members, we're now going into public session, so that's just been done. So just to advise that the meeting will be recorded and broadcast through Parliament buildings and online. To advise members that those in the public gallery are welcome, and obviously the use of mobile devices to keep on silent and in airplane mode or muted as well. And also that you can't connect to the Assembly Wi-Fi and passwords details are provided. So again, it's just to alert the room and those who are listening in that we have two members who are joining us online. We have Alex Easton and Justin McNulty as well, who are attending the meeting virtually, and obviously will bring members in. It's proposed that we have an oral evidence session with departmental officials from the Justice Delivery Directorate to the department's budget session and an overview of the Justice Delivery Directorate, and these of course will be recorded by Hansard, and again just to get agreement from members on this. Agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Again, just to remind you that you're obliged to declare any financial or other relevant interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence your approach to a matter that may be under consideration in today's meeting. And again, just to declare that now or before the item's raised. Any declarations? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on, members, then, just to agenda item 3, which is the draft minutes of the meeting that was held on the 22nd of February 2024. And just to inform members that the draft minutes of the meeting on that day are in pages 71 to 82 of the pack. And again, I'm just going to ask if you're content that the minutes are a true reflection of proceedings that took place on that day.
Agreed.
So you're agreed? Okay, thank you. Okay, matters arising, members. Item 4.1, so just to advise that a memo from the Clerk to the Finance Committee is at page 3, and that memo relates to items that were discussed at last week's committee pertaining to the properties at Victoria Square, apartment complexes in Belfast. And again, just to inform members that the Clerk to the Finance Committee has suggested that no further action be taken by any committees until the relevant departments have clarified responsibilities with regard to the residents and the communication that was received. Again, just to inform you is that we agreed at last week's committee meeting correspondence to be issued from the Justice Committee to the Executive Office as well, and obviously also to the Head of the Civil Service to be copied in. The Committee of Finance and the Committee of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. So again, it's just to ask you if you are content to note the item of correspondence and to agree that no committee takes no further action until the departments have come back and clarified their responsibilities.
Agreed.
Are members content? Okay, thank you. Okay, in terms of item 4.2, so just to advise the memo from the Clerk of the Committee to Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs on page 4. Again, this memo relates to the same issue pertaining to the Victoria Square apartments, and advised of contact having been made with that committee. Again, it's also to ask you that you're content to note the item of correspondence and to agree that the committee again takes no further action until departmental responsibilities are clarified. Members content? Agreed? Okay, thank you. We're now moving on to item 5, and it's an overview of the Department of Justice budget. Again, I'd refer you to pages 84 to 102 in your pack, and just to advise members that officials from the Justice Delivery Directorate to the Department of Justice are here to give an overview. So again, I want to welcome Deborah Brown to the committee, who is the Director of Justice Delivery Directorate. Very long-winded. Richard Logan, who is the Deputy Director of the Financial Services Division, and also Andrea Quill, who is the Head of Financial Planning, Strategy and Support. So again, you are very welcome to the new Justice Committee. I'll give you the opportunity now just to open up your presentations, and then members may indicate as we're moving through if there's a lot of detail, or we'll try and wait until the end then just for any questions. So over to yourselves, you are very welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to come along this afternoon to provide you with an overview of the department's budget. Joining me this afternoon, I have our Finance Director,
Richard Logan.
And Andrea Quayle, who is our Head of Financial Planning. So this afternoon is an opportunity for us to give you an introduction to the department's finances and to outline how the budget is allocated and the types of issues that we currently face. We thought it would be useful at this stage to give you a high-level overview, but of course we will come back to the committee with further information on the 24-25 budget as that process progresses. We very much value the input of the committee and we will engage with you throughout this process and take your views on board. In terms of the approach this afternoon, we want to talk through the slide pack, which hopefully you've all had access to. But before perhaps we get into the slide pack, I just want to, at the outset, highlight a couple of key issues around the current year's budget and next year's budget. As I'm sure you're all very aware, the budget situation has been extremely challenging for the Department of Justice and indeed for all NICS departments. Firstly, in the current year, the department is on course to report a break-even or a small underspend at this particular position of the year. This result has only been possible due to the very welcome decision by the Executive to provide additional funding of £75.3 million in order to manage the forecast overspends that the department was showing and also to meet the pay awards. Prior to that announcement, we had been forecasting a potential overspend of around about £35 million, which mainly related to the PSNI. That amount did exclude some of the elements of pay that then we were subsequently funded for. Secondly, looking ahead to 24-25, the department continues to face significant pressures, and indeed these are unprecedented pressures. The department's most recent analysis has now identified potential pressures of £444 million, which is 40% of our budget. And that assumes that there is no uplift on the current baseline. Further detail and the factors contributing to these pressures will be outlined as we go through the slide pack. You may be aware that the new Executive has already written to the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Northern Ireland Secretary of State pressing for urgent discussions on the Government's financial package for Northern Ireland. Until a final budget is set for 24-25, we cannot be definitive about the impact on the Department's spending areas and their ability to absorb pressures, particularly the recurrent implications of the pay awards that are currently being negotiated and settled for 23-24. However, we will seek to ensure that there is openness and transparency with the committee throughout this process. So if we maybe turn now to the slide pack itself. On the slide 2, this is the department's organisational structure. This provides an overview of our structure from a financial governance perspective. Within the core department, there are 5 directorates, and you're in the process of receiving that briefing from each director on their area of work. One of the features shown by the diagram is that there is a range of agencies and non-departmental public bodies. You will see that we have 5 agencies, and it's worth noting that there are only 9 agencies in total across all NICS departments. The bottom 2 rows are the 8 executive NDPBs, non-departmental public bodies, of which the largest by quite a margin is the PSNI, followed by police pensions. This range of bodies adds to the complexity of our budget management. Slide 3 shows a high level how the budget is allocated. You will note that the vast majority, 69% of our budget, sits with our non-departmental public bodies. This includes the PSNI, which makes up 65% of our budget. The executive agencies account for 25% of the department's budget, the largest of these being the Prison Service, Courts and Tribunal Service and the Legal Services Agency. You also see from this slide that there is only a very small amount that is allocated to the core department. That's 6% of our budget. Moving to slide 4. This shows the engagement that the finance team normally expect to have with the committee through the in-year monitoring round process. Whilst the specific details are still to be confirmed for the upcoming year, there are normally 3 monitoring rounds each year. The Department of Finance is responsible for coordinating the in-year monitoring process and providing advice to the Finance Minister on the proposals in each round. The Finance Minister will then bring her proposals to the Executive for approval. DOF will issue a commissioning letter in respect of each monitoring round to notify departments of the scope of the exercise and the deadlines for the returns. An indicative timetable for the in-year monitoring rounds is generally set out at the start of the financial year. These are the times of the planned engagement then with the committee, but as well as the in-year monitoring rounds, we expect to provide the committee with a briefing on any specific issues requested in light of emerging public expenditure issues throughout the year. As I said, we do anticipate coming back to you on the 24-25 budget. Previously, we have provided briefing to the committee on our monitoring round returns and the spring supplementary estimates, which are the technical outworking of these returns. The committee may be aware that the budget bill and the spring supplementary estimates debate took place in the week of the 19th of February. In line with our normal engagement with the committee, we will provide briefing to the committee in relation to the main estimates for 24-25, which would normally be around May. I would also like to highlight in the current financial year that DOF did not commission any in-year monitoring rounds. The departments were not in a position then, therefore, to bid for additional funding. Instead, DOF carried out a series of exercises to accommodate technical transfers, reduced requirements, and the allocation of centrally held funds. This is a reflection of the uncertainties and the challenges around the Northern Ireland budget in the 23-24 year. And we anticipate that the annual budget process will return to the normal timescales for 24-25 once that budget is finalised. I'll now pass across to Richard, who will take us through the rest of the slides. Thank you.
I'll start with slide 5, which shows how the department's budget is broken down. The main source of financing for public expenditure remains the departmental expenditure limit, referred to as DEL, and all DEL allocations are made on the basis of a clear distinction between resource DEL and capital DEL. Resource DEL is then further broken down into ring-fence resource and non-ring-fence resource. Ring-fence resource is a budget which has been ring-fenced by Treasury to cover the cost of depreciation and impairments, and these are accounting costs and do not result in actual cash costs. This ring-fence budget cannot be used for any other purpose, and the department's opening budget for 23-24 was 93 million. However, the main focus of any budget is the non-ring-fence resource DEL, and you'll sometimes hear it referred to as cash. It reflects the ongoing costs of providing services, for example, paying pension costs for staff and operating costs, including maintenance of buildings, utilities and IT costs. And the department's opening budget for this allocation was 1.157 billion. Finally, capital DEL. This reflects investments in assets which provide or underpin services in the longer term, such as buildings, IT and vehicles. And the department's current year opening budget was 129 million. Moving on to slide 6, this outlines the key features of this year's non-ring-fence resource DEL budget. On 27th of April, the Secretary of State announced the 23-24 resource and capital allocations for Northern Ireland departments. The opening budget for DOJ was the 1.157 billion, and this included a budget cut of 19.4 million, or 1.7%, as well as Treasury allocations of 31.2 million towards additional security funding and 3.2 million for NI protocol funding for PSNI. An additional in-year allocation of £11 million for legal aid pressures was provided by the Secretary of State in November 23. DOF also recently confirmed a £6 million allocation to cover the in-year costs of the PSNI data breach. However, this does not include expenditure for any associated compensation claims and legal costs which will be incurred in future years. And then on the 15th of February, the Executive confirmed an additional 75.3 million to cover forecast overspends and pressures in 23-24. So the chart on slide 7 provides you with an illustration of how the DOJ budget is allocated. The department has a range of agencies and NDPBs, so the budget is split across quite a range of areas. PSNI's opening allocation of 750.3 million represents about 65% of the department's overall budget. Significant elements of the budget sit with the Prison Service, 122 million, the Legal Services Agency, 101.9, and the Courts and Tribunals Service, 51.7 million. It should also be noted that the budget for courts is shown net, as it receives income of approximately £40 million, so its gross spend is in the region of £90 million. Slide 8 then provides a high-level overview of how the department's budget is allocated. As I mentioned before, 65% for PSNI, and secondly, 69% of our total budget is spent on staff costs. Of the remaining budget spent on non-staff, 30% is statutory or contractually committed, leaving less than 1% that is discretionary. This means that the final outcome of pay awards and availability of recurrent funding will have a significant impact on the department in terms of affordability and its ability to manage these costs within a limited budget. Turning then to slide 9, the Finance Minister's written ministerial statement on 15th of February provided additional allocations for justice. Firstly, the £75.3 million non-ring fence resource DEL for forecast overspends and pay awards, and secondly, £4.9 million for ring fence resource DEL in respect of depreciation charges. Taking into account these additional allocations, the department's final resource DEL budget non-ring fence for 23-24 is £1.259 billion. It's currently expected the department will report a break-even or small underspend position at year-end. Up to this point, we've been forecasting a potential overspend of approximately £35 million, mainly in respect of PSNI, and this £35 million excluded the cost of pressures relating to pay awards for 23-24. It's important to note, however, that the additional £75.3 million allocation from the Executive has been provided in respect of pressures in 23-24 only. This is not a recurrent allocation that will automatically be included in the department's baseline budget for 24-25. Slide 10 then shows the key features of our 23-24 capital budget. We initially received £128.8 million of funding, and this capital allocation contributes to a number of important projects, including ongoing maintenance of the ageing estates within police, prisons and courts, as well as key IT and digitisation projects. £36.8 million of the opening allocation was subsequently returned to the Department of Finance as part of the in-year technical exercises. The majority of this £30 million was in respect of the Police College. The easements identified are largely due to delays in commencing projects, which means that the costs will now move into 24, 25 and future years. And slide 11 shows how our capital is allocated. You'll see that our main capital spending areas are police, prisons and courts, and they make up most of the justice estate. Business areas within justice receive capital allocations each year based on the prioritisation of their bids. So moving on to next year's budget, the Department of Finance initially commissioned an information gathering exercise for budget 24-25 purposes on 8th of December 23. The Executive then subsequently agreed a different approach for next year's budget is more appropriate, and a revised budget exercise was commissioned on 18th of February with a return date of 29th of February today. This will be followed by a series of bilateral meetings with the Finance Minister and Executive colleagues, with the aim of bringing a budget paper to the Executive consideration in early April. One of the key issues for consideration will be the long-term affordability consequences of approving pay awards for 23-24 in the absence of any guarantee that recurrent funding will be provided for future years. If there is no increase in the Department's baseline allocation in 24-25, our most recent assessment indicates we will start the new financial year with pressures in the region of £444 million, or just under 40% of our baseline. £217 million of this relates to operational pressures, including pay and pension increases, inflationary costs, increased legal aid requirements, the continuing increase in prison population, and additional demand on courts and police services. The remaining £227 million of pressures relates to items of exceptional nature outside the direct control of the Department. These include estimated costs due to legal claims for the PSNI data breach, holiday pay, and McLeod injury to feelings cases. And there's a general level of uncertainty regarding the final outcome of the cases and the range of potential costs involved. Slide 13 relates to capital DEL. As in previous years, departments will take a zero-based approach to capital DEL and will have to bid for their share of capital budget available to the Northern Ireland Bloc. The department's initial assessment of requirement was £140.9 million, of which £70.8 million related to inescapable projects where there are firm legal or contractual obligations, and £70 million for high priority projects. Based on our most recent information now, the value of high priority bids has been revised down to £51.6 million, bringing the overall total to £122.4 million. It is expected that DOJ capital budget allocation in 24-25 will be significantly below the £120 million requirement identified, and therefore we will need to prioritise the bids received. There are also a number of high-value building and IT projects identified over the next 10 years, particularly within the prison service, court service, forensic science and PSNI. And given the likely constraints in capital budgets, it will be necessary then to take a strategic approach to allocating funding to these projects over the next 5 to 10 years in line with ministerial priorities and within the limited budget available. And that brings a close to our overview of the Department's finances. We would be happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thanks very much for your presentations. Open it up to members. If anybody... Yeah, Doug.
Could I just ask, just for my own, thank you for that, by the way. Richard, what the underspend? You keep saying small underspend. What was it? What figure are we talking about? The small underspend?
By year end?
Yeah.
Or it could be, well, there's a couple of factors in terms of when the pay awards are paid.
Yeah.
So if they're not paid before the end of March, then additional employer contribution rates will kick in.
Yeah.
So that will increase costs. So the underspend could be sort of, we're ideally within 1%, sort of less than 10 million. That would be our expectation.
Yeah, that's perfect. And do you know what the PSNI data breach, the 6 million that's been spent so far on the PSNI data breach, do you know what that's been spent on? Is that spent on legal costs? Is that spent on moving police officers' homes, or do we know?
Yeah. It involves there's overtime costs and also personal and physical security measures have been implemented
Right.
for staff across the.
And have we got a projection on that going forward then? Because that's just the first year cost. Is there a projection for that going forward? What's the rough projection?
Our understanding is those costs really contained within this year. In terms of the bid that went in, it was for costs incurred this year. If there's an increase next year, we haven't gone out for that. The future year costs we expect to be more to do with the compensation and legal costs, and that's the significant amount, and that will follow into next year or beyond.
Yeah, because you're looking at 444 million of pressures next year. So I take it as part of those pressures is the pressures from the data breach as well. So that's contained within that. So you must be baselining roughly somewhere what that's going to be. I'm just trying to see what the baseline is. I understand the pressures
for the data breach.
Yeah.
The figure PSNI are giving us is £116 million as a cost for the data breach for compensation and legal costs.
116
million.
And that's part of that 444 pressure. Yeah, yes. That 444 pressure.
444 is roughly split 270 million for operational recurring pressures.
Yeah.
The balance then of these one-off legal costs where they're paid, that's the end of it. However, and it's made up of the data breach costs, 116, and then there's holiday pay and McLeod injury feelings. But those the biggest figure would be the PSNI data breach.
116. That's perfect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have Alex Easton coming in virtually. Yep.
Thanks for your presentation. Your £440 million pressures for the next financial year, which is 40% of your budget, is absolutely massive. And I note that 65% of your budget goes to PSNI. Will that affect recruitment for the next financial year? And will there be any police officers recruited for next year? And considering the attrition rate of police officers that are retiring, are we looking at a situation where there may not be any recruitment of any police officers in the next financial year because of these pressures?
So the bid that is being constructed by the PSNI is around maintaining existing services and also to start to recruit again in order to get it back to a more sustainable position. There's a limit to how many officers they can recruit in 1 year. So within the bid from PSNI is an element to increase police numbers by approximately 145. Now that's a net figure, so that includes them recruiting probably around about the 500 and a normal attrition of about 355. So that is included within that bid. So that would start to bring them back up from the number that they
Okay.
expect to reach at the end of March of 358, which is an all-time low and nowhere near what was recommended in NDNA of the 7,500, and indeed is nowhere near the sorts of numbers that we heard the Chief Constable talk about specifically yesterday as well. But it will take them time to get back to that position, so the bid that's reflected for 24-25 is the maximum that they could potentially bring in the 1 year.
Okay, so there will be a slight increase in numbers, but not nearly enough.
That's dependent on the bid being met, of course, because their bid is
Okay.
quite substantial. The bid from PSNI outside of the exceptional items that Richard has already outlined is £141 million. And that's over and above the holiday pay and the data breach in the McLeod. So within that 141 is 8 million to start to grow the police officer numbers again.
Okay, just want to express my deep concern about the police numbers, so it's a big worry for me, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Stuart?
Now, just very briefly, in terms of those police numbers, when you say the limit that that can come in, I assume that is a physical limit in terms of the training ability of the capacity issue for the organisation.
Yes.
So actually, if the budget is met, this is good rather than bad.
Thank you, Stuart. Sinead?
Yeah, just maybe following on from Alex's question, because we had the permanent secretary last week and giving us a presentation in terms of the department's forward work programme and issues facing the department, and one of the big things was obviously the recruitment of prison service staff. So just obviously taking what Alex said, how much of that overspend is going, actually the department's attempt to, or the prison services attempt to actually recruit more staff, because we know they're severely understaffed.
Okay, so prison officer numbers, before the Minister left in August 22, the prison numbers were starting to increase, so the Minister had given approval for additional 56 officers. As a result of opening up 2 of the square houses, that has meant that they've had to incur some overtime. Estimated need is around about 38 additional officers to manage that. At the moment, that is just being managed through overtime. So the bid that we have placed is for another 38 officers on top of that. However, as you probably heard the Permanent Secretary say a couple of weeks ago, the population is continuing to increase, and if we had to open a third square house, then you would need probably another 38 prison officers on top of that. That is not included in that 444 million.
So there's a total of just over £20 million included as prison pressures going into next year. And maybe just give context as well. The department expects our salary cost and bill for 23-24 to be in the region of £850 million. So for every 1% of a pay increase, it will cost us an extra £8.5 million. So that's sort of as a broad indicator of pay awards. It would be approximately £8.5 million for every 1% of a pay award increase.
Thank you. Morris?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a question on following on from Alex. Did you say there that in March they expect the numbers of PSNA to be 3,580?
1,358.
No, I picked it up wrong, sorry, yeah. But within that, I know it's an operational matter, so you maybe not be able to answer. Is there any opportunity to delay retirements to keep the numbers up, or the ability to re-employ? And has it been factored in the budget, if there are? Maybe you can't answer that, it's an operational thing.
Unfortunately, I can't answer that one, sorry.
Yeah.
That would be for PSNI to address that one for you.
Okay, thank you.
You can ask that one.
I will.
They're
Yeah,
here,
thank
yes,
you.
no bother. Ciara?
Just in relation to, Richard, the capital budget that you mentioned, and obviously 70 million for inescapable projects. Do you foresee, is that based from last year, or is that forecasting for the year ahead? And then you'd mentioned, obviously, originally in the presentation for 70 million for high priority projects, and that's now reduced to, because that's quite a surprise that that's now reduced. So I'd like to see how was that reduced by the 20 million? What was the factors at play? And just finally, a third question, that's high priority projects. So you have medium and lower level capital projects that are in the system?
There are three categories that DWF asks us to submit bids for. The inescapable, where there's a legal or contractual requirement. high priority were things that haven't got to signing off on a contract or being legally committed, but are sort of in the system and maybe ready to go, or business cases being worked on. And then what they talk about is desirable items. So that's maybe smaller items. Our desirables are in the region for next year, maybe about £3 or £4 million. They're not a significant amount, but if they were being prioritised, they would be well down the list, because the inescapable would come in first of all. In terms of the reduction from 70 million down to just over 50, that's due to a reduction in the value for the police college. So police college had a total bid included, but just in terms of their state of readiness, they wouldn't be at the stage that expenditure could be spent during 24-25. So that's been reduced out. It's been profiled. It'll be in a future year spend, assuming it goes ahead. But in terms of expenditure in 24-25, that's the main reason for the decrease from the 70 million down to the 51 million. In terms of the bids for next year then, those are new bids that have come in from areas, so it's not taking last year's or anything. It's going out to all the business areas. Whenever DOF commissioned the work, and we had done a lot of work in advance of the DOF exercise, where we've gone out to business areas to get their plans for what they're going to spend, their projects and things like that. So the inescapable ones are sort of new areas or carrying on spend that's been in the system in previous years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Just very briefly, I'm appreciating that human resource in terms of staff is the largest call on the budget, but nevertheless, to what extent in budgeting for the department do you identify invest to save projects, and do projects get, as it were, a flag beside them to say and suggest that there's a strong argument for investing to save?
Yeah, as part of this second exercise that has been commissioned, the first exercise was really just about where your pressures are. This second exercise is asking the department for its bids. So our 444 million is for bids, but we also have, in addition to that, 2 million that we are bidding for what we're calling our transformation projects. Mm-hmm. So there are a few on that. So we have a mental health intervention to reduce reoffending by young people in the criminal justice system. We have one which we're starting to scope. You will have heard the Permanent Secretary talk about the oversight group that he has put in place around the prison population. So we've put in a marker bid there on transformation around the prison population transformation. That's working with our partners, with Probation Board and with Health, about what could be done moving forward. There's one for bail support scheme, pilot for a female remand cohort. There's one on prison service data analytics, which is really just about collecting the data to give us better management information to inform forward decisions. There's some in there for the PSNI. They are starting to think about their own transformation journey and what they might start to do around that. And there's a little bit there on the criminal injuries compensation scheme. So we have put marker bids in for transformation moving forward. So absolutely, those transformation bids will be about invest to save. They will save the system money. It will save other departments money. But business cases and that are being developed at this point in time and all of those.
And where that money can be clearly identified as not only savings to the Department of Justice, but serious savings to other departments, how much of a role do they have to play? And I take particularly the one you mentioned first, mental health. And that goes to education, it goes to health, it goes to virtually every department of government in Northern Ireland. What's their contribution to this?
So I think Stephen Martin will be up to talk to you whenever he comes up with Beverly Wall, the Director General. So he absolutely does engage with his partners in health and other departments to make sure that holistic approach is taken on these. As we know, different departments have different priorities and other challenges of their own, so this becomes very challenging but we all know that if we work together we will save money in the long run, but we are absolutely alive to that.
Okay, so there is a piece of work about that and about really determining that people should not be sitting in their silos and should be looking across to see where the best savings can be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciara?
Just a quick one on legal aid and the pressures under legal aid, and obviously in-house back in November 11 million was received. And I know it's demand led, but what's the forecast? You know, what's the pressures in the coming year?
Yeah, so legal aid, as perhaps Mr. Beattie probably remembers from being on the committee before, has been a challenge for us over the past number of years in that the legal aid has never been properly funded. And it had a baseline of around about 75 million, which was never anywhere near what was deemed to be the business as usual, which was usually around about 84, 85 million. That was a number of years ago. In 22-23, we successfully bid and secured an additional 20 million into that baseline, which brought the baseline back up to about 95 million. However, the demand is still exceeding the budget, and the forecast demand this year is 116 million. Now, we already started the year with a deficit. We secured the additional 11 million, and in the 75 million that we got from the executive on the 15th of February, we also got an additional 3 million pounds. That means that legal aid should finish the year with a backlog of around about 12 weeks, which equates to about 26 million pounds. Moving into the 24-25 year, as part of the 444 million, we have bid for 27 million pounds. It needs 22 million just to keep pace with the demand of 116 million per year. So even with that 27 million, that will not, reduce the 12 weeks significantly, but it will start to bring it down. And we would hope over a period of 2 years, if we get the right budget settlement, that we can start to pull that back. But legal aid is, it has not been properly funded for a number of years and continues to suffer from that. And indeed, in previous years, legal aid always relied on in-year monitoring to secure the additional funding. So what we want to try and do is get the proper baseline for legal aid moving forward. Paul Andrews will be up after, and he'll be able to give you a whole lot more information on that.
Thank you. Deborah?
Thanks very much. Anybody else? I suppose just on the same vein in terms of forward projections, where you talked about, I suppose, the exceptional items around legal claims and stuff, and are there projections at this point in terms of what they will look like around the data breach going forward, the holiday pay and the McLeod judgment? Is there any analysis at this point or a timeline as to when we're likely to see that in the next couple of years?
So we're expecting business cases to be coming through from PSNI on the data breach and on holiday pay, which will give us a little bit more granularity on those. We have got the projections included in the bid of 444 million. The timing of that is very uncertain, and whether all of the data breach figure that we quoted of 116 million would all be paid out in 24-25 remains to be seen. It depends on what way that pans out, but we do expect some more information from PSNI over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, and just in terms of the pressures then, particularly the demand-led services across the board, and the increase in costs with them, or is there an analysis then to match in terms of the capital or infrastructure needs that would run alongside the resource spends or pressures?
So at the moment, every capital project we have, we obviously do take into consideration the resource consequentials. If we do not get the 444 million, which includes quite a chunk there around pay, that means us holding more vacancies. That will require us to go back to the drawing board again and say, well, where can we hold vacancies and what are the consequences? And that could have consequences for capital projects as well. So we haven't gone into that detail yet, but we know that that is a significant risk for us. And the ability to manage around the vacancies is just around attrition. There's no vehicle to remove posts in any other way. And indeed, that 444 million, 217 of that is your business as usual, your operational issues. And if that bid isn't met, there is a significant risk that this department would be sitting in a very big overspend position because the scope to do anything is completely limited. And I think the other point that I would like to make is that the Department of Justice budget has had one of the worst settlements over the last 10 years than any other department. The funding over the last 10 years has increased by 43%. Justice has only increased by 3%. Health has increased by 70%. Education has increased by 45%. The Department of Justice has continued to take on new initiatives and continued to deliver. Its efficiencies are all maxed out. We actually don't have anywhere else to go on this, and we are in a very critical situation, and I wouldn't want to make light of that, but we have all the facts and figures which demonstrate what this department has done over the years to try and live within this settlement. But 24-25 is the most challenging year that we have ever had.
And I suppose that's some of the query around, particularly if you look at prisons and the increase in demand at that end, is I suppose the infrastructure in buildings to hold people. I mean, it's not up to scratch, is my understanding. A lot of work in terms of disused buildings coming back into use, as you say, and the associated staff costs. So would there be an assessment around that, and also the need for a women's facility which is separate, that there wouldn't be that mixed or integration? And obviously we're seeing concerns being addressed in terms of those issues. So
Yeah, so we've got a number of key capital projects moving forward, and one of them is a new women's facility.
okay. Thank you. We'll have Justin, who's online. Oh, you're on mute, Justin, if you're on mute, sorry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deborah and Richard and Andrea. What are the implications of the Department for Justice's budget from yesterday's ruling in the High Court that the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill is not compatible with European Court for Human Rights legislation?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that at this stage. I don't have any information on that to be able to give you any details of what the implications would be for Department of Justice, but I can take it away and try and come back to you on it.
Have you any initial thoughts or assessments?
Not at this stage.
And what's your sense of that ruling?
As I say, I haven't had a chance to give it proper consideration, so I wouldn't want to comment at this point.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. That's all I want to ask.
Thank you, Justin, and you can follow up just when you're in a position. Yeah, that would be good. That's all. Nobody else has indicated. So again, just to thank the three of you for coming along. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of you in the time ahead as well. So just thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Okay, members, we're going to move to agenda item 6, which is an overview briefing on the Justice Delivery Directorate, and I refer you to pages 103 to 107 of the pack, and just to advise you that officials from the Directorate are here to attend and give an overview. So again, I want to welcome Deborah back up to the table again, Director of Justice Delivery. We also have John Napier, Deputy Director of Information Services Division, Stephen Allison, Deputy Director of Enabling Access to Justice Division, David Lennox, Deputy Director of the Corporate Engagement and Communications Division, and Paul Andrews, Chief Executive of the Legal Services Agency. So again, you can all come forward to the table. You are very welcome to this new Justice Committee. We look forward to working with you over the next period. And I will just invite you to open up your presentations, and then we'll take questions from members. Just to alert you, we've also 2 members virtually online, Alex and Justin, and they may come in and ask questions as well. So just over to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the opportunity for the Justice Delivery Directorate team to come before the committee. I'm going to ask each of my colleagues to introduce themselves. They'll give you a short overview of their business area and just some of the challenges that they currently face. So I'm going to pass to Paul Andrews, who's our Chief Executive of the Legal Services Agency, to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Committee, good afternoon to you. I'll take that as my introduction. The only thing I would say is I'm also the Director of Legal Aid Casework, which means I'm responsible for decisions on the grant of civil legal aid. I was just going to focus on 2 issues, if I may. The first is the legal aid budget, and the second is fraud and error. Mr. Beattie may recognise some of these from a previous incarnation in the committee. In terms of legal aid budget, as the Bar Council and Law Society have brought an application for leave to apply for judicial review against the department in respect of payment times, my comments will be understandably brief on this subject. But as the committee will be aware, legal aid is a demand-led service, with funding being available to anyone who meets the relevant means and merits tests. As post-COVID recovery has progressed, we have seen a very high value in the bills that have been submitted. In 22-23, the department secured an additional £20 million of funding, which resulted in payments totaling £101.4 million for legal aid bills. This year we have secured £14 million, and that will allow us to reach £109.4 million of payments. And by the end of next month, we would expect all payments to be processed within a 12-week period. If I move to fraud and error, the agency has had two long-standing qualifications on our accounts. The first related to weaknesses in financial estimates of provisions for legal aid liabilities. Pleased to say that that qualification was removed in 2022-23. The second qualification is in respect of weaknesses in control over fraud and error prevention and detection. This covers what we term official error, that is the mistakes that we make, practitioner error, that is the supplier's mistakes, and applicant, which is the people who are the beneficiaries of legal aid. In 2022, these estimates are done on an annual year basis rather than a financial year basis. The error rate was estimated at 4.8%. The early indicators for 2023 suggest a further reduction in the level of official error. I'm going to quote the CNAG to bolster my case at this point. She said, "I welcome the marked advances over the last 5 years, especially in relation to the level of overpayments due to official error. This year, practitioner error will be estimated for the first time. Work is progressing well on that, and there's been high levels of compliance by the legal profession in submitting bills for assessment. And again, the CNAG has welcomed the development of this methodology. In respect of applicant fraud and error, in 2022, the agency conducted a review of live cases to test for ongoing financial entitlement, people who were in receipt of legal aid. This was estimated to prevent about £77,000 worth of overpayments, and we expect similar results from our current sample for 2023. Again, the CNAG has commended progress made by the LSA in this respect and have encouraged further investment in this area. In the last mandate, I provided the committee with a written update on our work to address audit qualifications. If it would be helpful to the committee, I'd be more than happy to do so again in the summer once our accounts have been audited and led, and that may be an opportune time to reflect on the progress that has been made. That was all I was going to trouble you with by way of an opening statement, and I was going to hand over to my colleague Stephen.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, committee. I'm delighted to be here. Stephen Allison, I'm responsible for enabling access to justice, and my division is responsible for ensuring appropriate options are in place to support citizens' access to justice. We lead on the delivery of a reform programme focusing on making the system more accessible and ensuring that it's fair, proportionate and responsive to the needs and resources, and that resources are used to that effect and best effect. 5 key pillars within the programme. I'll just touch on each of them very, very briefly. First pillar is civil justice modernisation. Second pillar is a review of civil legal aid framework in the civil and family space. Third pillar is a review of criminal legal aid framework. The fourth is a review of the taxation assessment process currently conducted by a member of the judiciary. And fifth pillar is looking at emerging business needs and also the development and introduction of a statutory registration scheme for legal practitioners. In terms of modernisation programme, it was launched by the Minister in 2021 to identify areas where improvements can be made to ensure the system allows disputes to be settled more swiftly with greater choice and at lower costs. To date, focus has been on identifying changes which will improve accessibility and enhance fairness. The direction of travel over the next few years will now be the subject of further discussions with the Minister. In terms of civil legal aid review, the purpose of that review is to identify and set out the full range of civil legal aid reform options that may be available to the Minister and to describe their cost and that impact across the practitioners' base and sustainability and so forth. The reviews at a very early stage were in the research and evidence gathering phase, and our immediate task is to issue a call for evidence to citizens, service users, service providers, and separately to the practitioners who provide the service in the court space. hoping to have that published within the next month, and we'll be advising the committee of that in advance, so we'll give you a sight of the call for evidence, and happy to take questions on that front. In terms of the criminal legal aid review, His Honour Tom Burgess was appointed last October to lead a review of the criminal legal aid framework. He's examining the framework in 4 areas: PACE interviews, magistrates' courts, Crown courts, and then finally in the parole review process. He's due to report his findings and recommendations by the end of June of this year, and that deadline will be dependent on getting all of the data and continued engagement, which have been very positive with the practitioners and the profession at this stage. In terms of taxation, the primary objective in the review is to conduct a review of the legal aid expenditure, which is currently assessed by the Judicial Office Holder, the Taxing Master, as she's described, with a view to bringing that expenditure onto the purview of Richard, the Perm Sec, as the Accounting Officer. Just by way of a sort of context, there's about £20 million a year assessed and ordered through taxation that Paul's team then have to give effect to payments. So our project is looking to bring that onto the purview of the department. Again, very early stage in terms of just trying to understand what that process is within the judicial system. Finally, on the statutory registration scheme, purpose is to develop a scheme to support the delivery of a high quality service. We've worked really well with the profession. We've developed a draft code of practice and are developing processes now to just audit compliance against that. To support the programme, finally, we've also established a stakeholder engagement forum with the broadest possible attendance and membership, so we get as many views informing how we communicate, how we develop our evidence base, how we engage with citizens and practitioners and service providers, and separately an equality reference forum, so groups that have vulnerabilities, that have other needs in terms of accessing, how do we break some of those barriers, how can we listen to those individuals and those groups. I'll pause at that point and hand over to you, because that's a very brief run through. Appreciate it's very high level.
Thank you, Steve.
I'll hand across to David.
Afternoon, and thank you very much. I head up the Corporate Engagement and Communications Division, and the responsibilities of that division includes a range of corporate functions, as well as delivery of compensation schemes and oversight of the Troubles Permanent Disablement Payment Scheme for our responsibilities onto that. Within the CECD, our responsibilities include providing support for the Minister within our private office, and also an assembly team that coordinates responses to assembly questions and interface with the committee, and of course engage with our departmental assembly liaison officer as well. The department's press office is also within CECD, as well as a governance unit which supports and promotes a range of governance functions across the department, including supporting the Departmental Management Board and development of the department's corporate plan and annual business plans. So we will plan in due course to be sharing a copy of the 24-25 business plan with this committee. Another branch within my team is responsible for coordination of equality-related issues within the department, as well as leading on initiatives to support the development and leadership of staff across the DOJ. 2 other areas within my responsibility are not corporate services, but important delivery areas. So I have oversight of compensation services, which is responsible for the delivery of statutory compensation schemes related to both criminal injury and criminal damage. The aim of those schemes is to recognise the impact on victims who have suffered a criminal injury or criminal damage to their property. Some work has commenced on the review of the criminal damage compensation scheme, and we will, in due course, wish to go back to committee at some stage with more information on that. And finally, you may be aware of the Troubles Permanent Disablement Payment Scheme. The department was designated by the Executive Office to exercise the administrative functions of the Victims Payments Board on the board's behalf. The Victims Payments Board is an arm's length body of the Executive Office and has overall responsibility for delivery of the scheme. And that scheme, as you well know, exists to provide payments to those who have had a permanent disablement as a result of a troubles-related incident. The role within CEC is the department is responsible for providing the necessary staff and infrastructure to support the Victims Payment Board in delivery of that scheme. Thank you very much. I'm just going to pass over then to John.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Committee. I'm responsible for the Information Service Division. It is a fairly broad remit. It is responsible for a range of specialisms: record management, ICT, programme and project management, health and safety and facilities management. The most public-facing area of my division is Access NI, which I'm sure you all are aware of. The service is responsible for the Criminal History Disclosure Service under the legislation, Part 5 of the Police Act, and discloses relevant criminal information to employers and voluntary groups. Performance has been significantly increased since COVID, and the net result of that is that the business is now at its busiest ever, and we are anticipating that we will do 180,000 disclosures this year. So if you look at that in terms of our COVID, that's up about 28,000 disclosures. The average, but that has not impacted at all in terms of our delivery. So the average performance in terms of days to complete a basic or standard check is currently 1 day. And an enhanced check is 3 to 4 days because it takes a bit more detail on that. The sustained increase in demand is something that we've been looking at over the last couple of years, has allowed us to look at a fee reduction. So the expectation is that the basic and standard fees will reduce by £2 to £16, and the enhanced disclosures will reduce by £1 to £32, and this will come into effect in April 24. So that is relatively imminent. In terms of the information technology area, we have a delivery mechanism whereby technology specialists are delivered within each of our main agencies to provide the technical support, and they are outposted and report back to our Chief Technical Officer to ensure that the department has a clear ICT strategy, and we can share information around all of that. The issue then becomes that during the profile, the technical deliverable profile of the department has meant that following COVID, we have moved our technology base largely to laptops, and we have introduced a lot more collaborative tools, particularly MS Office. This is the effect of this. Effectively allows us to build in more business continuity across the organisation, and is aligned to our hybrid working that's currently in place. ICT obviously plays an integral part in everything we do across the organisation, and my staff are currently heavily embedded in some major projects such as the Vision 2030 for courts, with the PRISM and the NIPS as well, so the Northern Prison Service. I've also looking at major, and then we are also looking at the Causeway Criminal Justice database as well. We're responsibility for that. So broad range of very highly secure and very secure systems that the technical staff within my area are responsible for. Another area of my division, records management. This branch provides policy and guidance and monitoring in relation to FOIs, DPAs, and general security across the service. So that's basically where that's coming from. We also, in that area, are manage vetting, which is another area in terms of the department. So and ensure that appropriate information security is in place. The estates and sustainability area, again another area within my division, is a growing area, particularly the sustainability in view of the Climate Change Act. But in addition to that, it's facilities management, so it's health and safety and ensuring that our sites are secure and health and safety is getting the appropriate prominence. We also, in terms of within that space, is promoting sustainable initiatives as well, so that we and the whole behavioural change in relation to how the staff understand their commitments to sustainability. In addition, we are looking at the management of the estate, and we are currently engaged in the Castle Buildings refurbishment project, which is at this stage is at a detailed design stage, and it is hoped that when it completes, it will provide the core department with a flexible space suitable for hybrid working. It also will reduce the size of our estate, so Massey House, Knockview and Hillview will all no longer be vacated, and that will basically allow centralisation of our resources. And finally, really in terms of the sustainability element. Obviously, we're engaging, while we're not a major player in this space, we're engaging very heavily with DERA in terms of the Climate Action Plan and supporting that. And that's a very quick gallop through of the areas. Probably it's very dispersed, but hopefully I'm happy to take any questions.
I know. Thanks very much, everybody. So, Doug.
Thank you. Paul, first of all, thank you for recognising our last discussions about fraud and error in legal aid. And I know it's demand-led, and I'm glad this action's been taken. That's a positive. So I see that as a positive. Can I just ask a question? Because it's in my mind, and there's cobwebs in my mind in regards to this. But so I'm asking, and it might have been dealt with a long time ago. Were we not discussing on legal aid, going back to releasing the list of the beneficiaries of legal aid, that is the companies who work and get legal aid, and doing that in a sort of were we not going that direction?
I also remember that discussion the last time I was at this committee.
I can't know where it went to. That's
yes, the Minister actually consulted on that in the last mandate and had concluded that we would proceed to publish. We've been doing extensive work on that. We have one little hiccup in that in 1920 we changed computer systems, so it's just taken a while longer to reconcile the first quarter. I wouldn't want to overstate or understate payments to anyone in that period. So we're in the process of bringing that to some sort of conclusion. We'll bring it back to the Minister, and you might even see a list at some point in time.
Well, that's okay. I thought it was in there somewhere. I just couldn't remember from the last time. And could I then just ask David a question on the troubles-related pension scheme campaign that's just been released to a leaflet that's gone out to every household? Has it gone out to every household?
Yeah.
But it's gone out to every household in Northern Ireland, but this is a UK-wide scheme. What are we doing to get the same information to those people who could be entitled in the rest of the United Kingdom?
So, this and I'm aware that what the staff has been doing, this TEO would be supportive in terms of doing a wider communication strategy. Yeah. So the actual leaflet drop to every household in Northern Ireland is part of that strategy, but there has been a wider piece of work done around. So there was a media briefing quite recently, and that has been picked up quite a bit in the actual number of English newspapers and so on, online and in print copy. But also there are plans underway to distribute the leaflet to try and some of the key groups, both in terms of the South of Ireland and in GB. Yeah. Coincidentally, there's an event this morning, had a conversation with the Veterans Commissioner, and he's quite keen as well. So people like that are really key ambassadors to reach out to his network of organisations. And I think it's a hard one to try and raise awareness, but the best we can possibly do, and I know the team are working very hard, is to link in with the network organisations. And certainly there is some contacts been made in both organisations in GB and hopefully in the south of Ireland as well, to try and get the message out there.
Is there an argument to be made for an extra resource that comes from central government in regards to this? Because what you're doing is fair enough, but you're still delivering it to every household in Northern Ireland because we're all entitled. And actually, in Northern Ireland, we have more of an awareness to this than anybody else, whereas in the rest of the United Kingdom they don't have an awareness, but they're actually built into exactly the same scheme. So somebody living in England, Scotland or Wales are built into the same scheme if they're living in Armagh or in Londonderry or elsewhere. Now, I'm not saying that there needs to be a leaflet drop to every house in the United Kingdom, but the point I'm making is if you're saying that we could have went to key stakeholders in England, Scotland and Wales and done this, then we could have done that in Northern Ireland, for example. So I don't know why there's a disparity in the way we've delivered this.
Yes, and I do take your point, but I suppose maybe the expectation always was that there would be a higher proportion of applications come from Northern Ireland due to the nature of the scheme. But, and we should take some comfort in this, but there certainly has been a diversity of applications across the world. There's something like 500 plus applications, like outside NI, going away as far as Australia and so on. So the message is getting out there. It is a challenge, and I know particularly in some of the veterans groups maybe it's been slow to pick up in some of those areas, but I think, and listen, it's not to say this has started now, this has been going on for a while, and even there was a kind of a session I know that the team had last week with some key groups, but I think cost prohibitive would be a challenge, I think, of trying to do it in the GB, but I think we just have to keep, I think it's probably a recognition of the leaflet drop here was a realisation that probably the highest proportion of applications are going to come from Northern Ireland.
And don't get me wrong, I think it's positive. So I'm just trying to get a rationale for the wider. And thank you for answering. I thought you might have batted me away to the TEO on that one. Go and ask the TEO. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ciara.
It's just an on-legal aid as well, and it's probably for Paul and Stephen. I suppose two things, and it's more to be more informed and educated around legal aid, is around the eligibility and merit test. When was that set? And does it be regularly reviewed? And then secondly, we've heard about from Deborah previously the huge demands that's placed on it, the financial bid that has gone in, and it still wouldn't be enough to meet that demand. What does, even for the end of this financial year, what does the money equate to in relation to the number of people who benefit from the scheme? And is there any trend in relation to the types of cases that these people bring forward? What would be kind of the top three, for instance? And then obviously there's 2 ongoing reviews. Is there timescales on them reviews and when they're due to report? So thank you.
Will I take the first question then? It sounds as if I should offer any member of the committee who wants to come down and talk about legal aid that we're happy to do that, and that's a genuine offer. Financial eligibility, I had a notion somebody might ask about this. So, advice and assistance, if someone has disposable income of less than £234 a week, they're entitled financially, or they could be on a benefit. For representation higher, that's in the High Court and County Court, it's £10,995 per annum, or 9,937, depending on the type of the case you have. But there's lots of allowances that you would deduct in that level to get your disposable income figure. Those haven't been reviewed for quite a number of years. And I'll not steal Stephen's thunder, but he might say to you that financial eligibility forms part of one of the pillars. I think the other thing, maybe just to comment on in terms of financial eligibility, are the number of people who receive legal aid because they're in receipt of passported benefits. Mm-hmm. So in the year, for the first 6 months of this financial year, there was about 71% of people who received some form of legal aid were in receipt of a benefit. And of those people who were in receipt of a benefit, 68% of them were in receipt of a passported benefit. And I think that's almost part of the universal credit cycle, that benefit brings more people into scope of legal aid, because the upper reaches of that would have exceeded where previously the financial reaches of legal aid financial eligibility would have went to. I wasn't proposing to go into lots of changes of cases, because we are actually trying to publish for the first time a formal official stats, which will be published before the end of the current financial year. That will take us up to the year 22-23, and then before we publish our annual accounts, which will probably be the 7th of July, we'll publish the 23-24 official stats, so there'll be lots of details there, and maybe that's something we could come back to and look at patterns and trends in that side of things. Sorry, Stephen, did you want to pick up on the reviews?
I will, thank you. In terms of timetabling of the reviews and the scope of the reviews, I'll take the civil review first. We're planning to issue the call for evidence, as I mentioned earlier, in the 2 questionnaires to citizens and practitioners in March, with a closing date start of May for return of that. That will give us time to do the impact assessment, the analysis. We would then have the findings presented to the Minister in June 24, which will then hopefully inform what we need to focus on. We are trying to build in that our initial findings and assessment is also shared with all stakeholders to fine-tune our thinking. So this is our working out. Do you think we've got it right? Thereafter, the timetable becomes really dependent on the scope of what reform options are decided upon. In terms of in civil and what we are looking at in the call for evidence, there's quite a lot, but to break it down into the key areas, just to address one of your questions, We're asking for reviews on the scope of legal aid in the civil and family space. So currently it covers X, Y and Z. Is that right for this time moving forward? It hasn't been reviewed in a long time. So what do we want to spend our money on here? Citizens, practitioners, what's the best bang for our money? Also, the eligibility tests, that the gateway to get into legal aid. Have we got those right? What do we need to be looking at there? So we're asking for views on that. We're also asking views on the merits test, because there is an element of examining the merit of any particular application that may be in a contested space. And also, critically for me, remuneration levels, because we have a profession providing a good service across the piece to citizens. We need to look at the remuneration levels to ensure that we're satisfied with providing a service but paying a fair, appropriate rate for that service.
Maybe I can come in, because there's one of your questions got missed between the two of us, and that was the number of people who benefited. Maybe the way you phrased your question, I wondered if you were thinking that does the limit of the funding mean that individuals can't get legal aid? That's not the case, because legal aid is granted purely on the financial means of the individual and the merits of the case. There is no regard to the cost of the case in that process. So the pressure point is on the payment of bills, not on the availability of a service. So I just wanted to make that point clear.
Probably one of the points, but secondly, the number of people as well. I'm conscious of the increase in legal costs. So from a few years ago until now, and with the increase of costs for legal costs, has there been, is it a decrease in real terms, the number of people that's benefiting, despite the fact there's an increase
in the actual
cost
cost of
the... So numbers, so it's both?
If I talk about the number of applicants, because an individual could have more than one application, so it's maybe simpler for me to phrase it in that way. So last year we had 64,000 grants of legal aid. Now that was slightly down on the previous year. The only area that was significant was there was a reduction in the grant of the Crown Court, but that's just a process of the cases flowing from the Magistrates Court through, and there was a drop in the grants of advice and assistance. But the numbers have been in and around the mid-60s for a period of time now.
Just to close off, I've touched on the civil review. You'd asked for the timetabling for both reviews.
Yes.
And Judge Burgess' review, he is, under his terms of reference, due to report his findings and recommendations by the end of June this year. And then that will be subject to full consideration within the department and decisions taken on the assessment of that. And we will be keeping the committee updated on the progress of both reviews and findings of the reviews to take questions and provide feedback.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Paul.
Chair, thank you very much. Just very briefly, Stephen, you made reference to a review of the circumstances about the role of the taxing master. And were you suggesting that that role would transfer to the permanent secretary as he is the accounting officer?
It probably wasn't as precise as it could have been in that space, so apologies. The review is to look at removing not the function or the role of the taxing master, but it's to take the area that the taxing master is making orders on legal aid cases and bringing that assessment process into the purview of the department. The taxing master will still have a function on other cases that don't come into the legal aid space.
Which don't come into legal aid.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're bringing in really the £20 million roundabout that is ordered through taxation that Paul ends up paying out of his budget.
Yes.
We're looking at creating an assessment process internally and building in a fee structure that allows hopefully a degree of more predictability in setting budgets and understanding the flow of funds and costs in that space. So it's not the rule, so apologies if I misled.
No. But I understand what you're saying, and I think that's probably the right direction to be moving in. Thank you.
And maybe just to add a little fact to that, if we were looking at the bills that we pay, Stephen says it's about 20 million in tax cases, but an awful lot of tax cases are reasonably routine in terms of the value that comes with them. But then you get complete outliers that are very significant costs, and we reckon about 1% of the bills that are high tax cost cases would represent something like 8% of our spend. So there's a sense there which we need to have an understanding, because that brings us to the predictability of the demand of the service. We have absolutely no comment to make about the cost of those cases. It's simply the impact that that has on other areas of business. I was making the point to colleagues previously, we've got a very big tax bill which was paid this week. That one tax bill is the equivalent of over 2,000 magistrates' courts criminal cases. So that is part of the ebb and flow of payment times and processes. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. And presumably this will then bring an element of consistency to what those claims are for.
And of course I would have no comment about the consistency with the taxi master looks at things, because that's within her remit at the moment, but obviously there would be a greater degree of predictability perhaps if we put it in that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll have Justin coming in virtually.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Chair. I attended a conference yesterday in Uri, hosted by Armagh Down Women's Aid, and Eileen Murphy, Chief Executive Officer of Uri. Armagh Down Women's Aid deserves enormous credit in organising a very, very powerful conference, working to end domestic abuse with the theme of Be the Change. In terms of one of the major problems that was discussed at the conference was access to legal aid, with the breadwinner blocking women and girls from accessing illegal aid, preventing them accessing justice essentially based on their working the system to defend themselves, to protect themselves, and leaving women and children and women and girls out of their homes essentially on the breadline with no access to legal support. So tell me how the legal aid system is helping women and girls who are suffering from abuse.
Justin, I hope I can make this clear, because there's three different aspects to this. The first aspect, Justin, I'm not sure if you can hear me because the screen appears to be frozen.
Abuse.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, if an individual is exposed to the scenarios that you were outlining, while the financial eligibility test would normally include the means of a partner, that would not necessarily apply in those circumstances, so that it would be perverse to insist on the means of the partner if that was being used against someone. The second is that there are two waivers that are available. The first is a long-standing domestic violence waiver, which is really for non-molestation orders and people seeking non-molestation order to protect themselves from the sorts of scenarios that you were outlining. Now, that's been available since at least 2015, and effectively it works on the basis that if someone has a disposable income of more than £234 a week, they pay a contribution of £134 plus whatever the excess is. So there is a scheme that seeks to make legal aid available widely. The other aspect of it is a newer aspect, and those that were involved in the legislation in 2022, there was a new domestic abuse waiver that was introduced, and that again works on the same basis. But if I give a worked example, and I give the worked example because this is what was in the material that we published at the time to solicitors, that if someone had a disposable income of £17,401.24. Don't ask me why we picked that specific number, but if someone had that level of disposable income, then the contribution that they would be required to pay under that scheme is £169.38. So there is a scheme, and I make the point in that context because if that domestic abuse is in respect of the higher courts, that contribution can be paid over a 12-month period. So again, there's a number of measures to try and facilitate that. I would simply say, Justin, if an individual is finding that they're blocked in some way, their solicitor should be speaking to us. And we can always look at an individual case and what is happening. There are a number of waivers in certain cases that can be applied as well. And we regularly do bulletins to professionals to alert them to this fact. We've been supported by the Law Society in getting this message out. And in fact, last week we did an online seminar and we were talking about the domestic abuse, the domestic violence waivers, and also the general waivers that can be applied to support individuals in particular circumstances. So if there's particular cases, more than happy to look at them.
If I could just build on that, because we're also looking at monitoring the sort of the uptake on the waivers and so forth, and looking to see how we can promote it further. And as Paul says, the Law Society has been fantastic in that support. But we have developed some animations, some videos, some walkthroughs that we'll try and get on NI Direct, on Justice website, Law Society websites, to try and just tell everybody and go through Women's Aid, who do fantastic work in this space, go to your service delivery partners, the voluntary sector, to try and promote awareness that this exists, that you can ask for it. Talk to your solicitor, the waivers will be available. It's fairly straightforward in the mechanics of it.
We also work with the Victims Commissioner, because obviously she has an interest in this space as well, to try and promulgate a greater degree of information and understanding of it, availability.
Thank you. Justin, are you looking at it again?
Would you agree that? Would you agree that there's an issue, that a theme at a Women's Aid conference is their access to legal aid and access to justice because of barriers through the legal aid system? So there's an issue, there's a big problem that when this has been raised as a major issue at a Women's Aid conference in the year 2024. It's shocking, it's sad, it's very, very poor.
I think it's something, certainly with my remit, I'd be really keen to speak to Women's Aid and the individuals organising that conference to try and understand again exactly what's at play and what we can do. So perhaps after this, if we can get details, I'd be more than delighted to speak to Women's Aid. I'm meeting with the Victims Commissioner.
Are you not speaking to Women's Aid already?
We are, but I want to make sure that I pick up on this specifically and say, flowing from that conference, what can we do? We very much in both reviews, we're trying to find what the voices are and listening to what citizens are telling us.
Okay, thank you. Tell me, in relation to the troubles-related pension scheme, Doug mentioned this being a UK-wide scheme. What about for families who are in the south of Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, who have been displaced from South Armagh, for example, because of the brutality they experienced at the hands of the IRA in South Armagh, and who've had to leave their home? Families have to leave their home in South Armagh because of what was done to their family members. How will they access the Troubles Pension Scheme?
Listen, they can access the scheme, and I suppose Doug did give help and remind me that the scheme does fall within the responsibility of the Executive Office, but I am aware through the team that part of the campaign is to extend promotion of the scheme beyond Northern Ireland, so that's across GB and the Republic of Ireland, and they have been linking into those. So those groups are eligible to apply. There is some criteria around eligibility and so on, but certainly the key message I think that they're seeking to achieve through their comms plans is to make sure that everyone's aware of the scheme. Obviously decisions around eligibility and so on are a matter for an independent panel within the board, but no, I think they want to certainly promote that within this island, certainly as much as they possibly can.
Okay, what are the implications for the Department of Justice from yesterday's High Court ruling that the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill is not compatible with European Court for Human Rights legislation?
Responsibility for those would fall for another part of the department, so I certainly wouldn't be in a position to comment.
I already covered this. I did say that we would take it away and we would come back.
Did you hear that, Justin?
Anybody else got a position on that?
Already covered.
They're going to come back just in terms of the division that deals with those matters. So they'll come back with an update to the committee on the question that you've asked.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Morris.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be brief, and thanks very much for your presentations. as a new member of the committee, I have found it a very informative afternoon. I have an easy question for John. It's around Access NI. If someone was working with a sports club and a community association, they need 2 Access NI checks. Do you not keep on record somebody's profile to make that easier for them? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if a sports club had 5-6 coaches all needing to go through Access NI, can they be processed at the one time?
So to cover them, the first thing is very much it's an individual thing and relates to the specific time and the specific role you're doing. So therefore, it's very much so those sort of block things. Now, in terms of large sports clubs, we're working very closely with them and they're done. But obviously, the scheme by its very nature is individual, and very nature it's at the time that they are applying. So that's why it's done that way. We are currently engaging with the Disclosure and Borrowing Service, which is introducing a new system, and hopefully that will then allow us to look at updating it and speeding our way of doing it. But the process, Morris, is effectively, it's almost like an MOT at the time you do it, so that's why it is very much focused on an individual.
Perfect, thank you.
Nobody else here. I just have a couple for you. So, Paul, just in terms of the judicial review, I imagine the committee will want you back in terms of the whole legal aid process, and Stephen, yourself as well, in terms of access, and particularly with the reviews and that will be ongoing as well. But is there a timeline for the judicial review at the moment?
Not at this point in time. I think the next case management hearing is this coming Monday.
Okay.
So at this point in time, there's no timeline that has been set out.
Okay, no bother. I'll not get into details then in terms of the issues picked up, but I know payment times is an issue that has come up, so we'll come back to that. In terms of Stephen, yourself, just around, I suppose it builds on some of the questions that were asked earlier around the civil legal aid. So just the call for evidence, who you'll be engaging, how you'll be doing that engagement, I suppose linking into maybe David's team and stuff around looking at issues within the system more broadly that's been raised in terms of equality issues, making sure the system is representative of society out there and those who find themselves in the system disproportionately around social class, gender, ethnicity. What are you doing, to go above and beyond in terms of front-facing engagement with organisations that would then, work and advocate on behalf of those that find themselves in the system more broadly?
2 elements, Chair. I think on that first is the call for evidence was split it into 2 questionnaires. So one of the questionnaires is focused on the service user, the assisted person, and the individuals. And the disbursement of that questionnaire will be through all of the various groups that have helped shape our thinking in this space, so that we're going to ask them to, we don't have a database that will be able to access those individuals entirely, so we're asking the groups to go out. We'll get responses from the groups and the organisations, but we're also hopeful we'll get individual responses from people who have been in that space. In terms of ethnicity and the various categories and the vulnerable groups and so forth, part of the questionnaire covers that in terms of trying to get some information there, but we also have established the Equality Reference Group to help us understand and test our thinking in this space and hear directly from organisations and individuals that represent those groups, so I can understand and my team can understand what are the problems facing access to justice from their particular perspective. So everything we get will be tested through those groups and that forum.
Are there human rights organisations involved in some of those groups then as well, or?
Yeah, we'd be going through, you can imagine if we were doing a statutory consultation, we'd be going out to all those groups, so we'd be basically doing that mail shot with a questionnaire to everybody we think can have an interest or can pass it on to somebody who has an interest that we don't have on lists. It's a widest call for evidence that we think we can do at this point. And again, if it's not as robust as we'd like, the forum will be able to tell us where else we can go to and what we maybe think of and shape our thinking in that space.
Okay, thanks very much. David, just in terms of the corporate engagement then more widely, I suppose just picking up on those issues in terms of how we're regularly updating who we're engaging, who you're consulting with, and just making sure, I suppose, matching that back to who's actually using or engaging with the system as well, and other disproportionate sections of our population, and are we doing concerted or targeted programmes of engagement then in terms of meeting that need. And the other bit was just around the pension. I know it sits within TEO, but just are there review mechanisms built into that? And are there any challenges or implications at the moment that has been identified in terms of the scheme more broadly?
Listen, the scheme has not been without its operational challenges, and we quite often refer to it as a gift that keeps on giving in terms of some of the challenges we didn't anticipate. There is a formal review that is within the regulations, and that falls to the Secretary of State, and they have to complete that review by the 31st of August this year, and that is actively ongoing. One of the key issues I suspect, and it was raised by the former Victims Commissioner, was around there's currently within the regulations the provision for backdating of payments if an application is made within 3 years of the scheme opened. So that currently comes to an end on the 31st of August. I know certainly the Victims Commissioner has was, before he left office, was very much of the view that that should be extended. Currently the scheme is due to run for 5 years, but he certainly thought the backdating and no, the arguments could be made that in terms of a quality basis, just if you apply a month after that deadline, why would you not be entitled to backdating? But that's going to be a matter for the Secretary of State, who made the regulation. So,
see, does that form part of the review then that he's carrying out? Is
yes,
it
they have indicated
consideration?
they will consider that as part of the review.
Okay.
And I think they have certainly written to our minister, have written to TEO ministers, and I think they've written to political parties as well, seeking their views on that. So they have, but certainly, and the sectoral groups have made their views known as well, and I think they would be supportive of the Victims Commissioner view that it should be extended. So our minister will be wanting to respond to the Secretary of State in terms of her views, though I haven't had a chance to speak to her yet, but she will be responding to her views and their views as well. So that's that, and certainly I know the team has faced many challenges in terms of the complexity of the scheme and at all times seeking not to re-traumatise those who apply to the scheme. But one of the challenges primarily has been is securing medical evidence, and that is because ultimately this is going back a long time, 50 years, and records keeping was not what it was or what it is now. Going back to your wider point about equality, and I suppose there's probably a couple of issues there. It remains an ongoing issue for us seeking to embed quality within the department. I think that's the important thing. So within the corporate services side, we're not involved in the direct policy development, but certainly our message is, and where we can support colleagues, is that where you are doing policy development, that a quality impact assessment, rural impact assessment, that is a core part of the process, and making sure you consult. And I know there is challenges out in the sector as well with the number of consultations. But I know another issue that the committee did take an interest as well was in terms of the equality or over or under representation of maybe some parts of the community within the criminal justice system. And that I know there's some work was done, research which was commissioned through Youth Justice. Again, we're having some conversations with that with our criminal justice organisations and with the Equality Commission. But that is an ongoing challenge, I have to say, and it's very dependent on the data that is collected at source, and that tends to be in police custody suites. And that can be a challenging environment at any Friday night, and even more challenging to collect the quality information. And then there's bigger issues around validation. But we're certainly not giving up on that one. We're certainly keeping going. But when you do talk to the individual CJOs, there's local problems there. But there's certainly more work I think we can do, and certainly we're trying to be as innovative as we possibly can around that.
Okay, thanks very much. And John, just in terms of the estate, just a question really around, I suppose, regional balance in terms of travel and all of that. Yeah. Hybrid working, the impact in terms of what that's going to look like, and other challenges around the hybrid working approach, both in terms of the staff, in terms of implementing the services, but then also the user at the other end. And then around digitalisation, just the challenges and costs, I suppose, in terms of the budgetary pressures that we're talking about as well, and the issue that we've even raised on finance yesterday around the security of the systems and potential future threats around artificial intelligence and anything else that may be developed.
Okay, I'll start with the estate question, and the Department of Justice estate strategy is very much heavily caveated on the Northern Ireland estate strategy, so the NIC estate strategy, so we're plugging into it. A lot of our estate is actually owned by the Department of Finance. So we are effectively just renting those things. So our input into that is very much aligning to it. Now, in terms of the geographical spread of that fell out of the estate strategy, which then established a number of hubs across Northern Ireland, and those hubs were a lot of work in terms of the location of those hubs was very much considered in terms of the main corridors of travel, and trying to set a reasonable distance from people's homes to try and do that. So they have been established to do that. In terms of the technology that's in those, they're slightly different, and there's effectively within the Department of Justice there's sort of two different networks. So obviously the Northern Ireland Gov network which the normal civil service use, but we also have a confidential network on top of that. So we've done an awful lot of work in terms of profiling what's secure, what's not secure, and how we can best maximise those, and then within some of those centres ensuring that there is ability to access the more confidential systems. So there's been a bit of work around all of that, and part of how we're looking in terms of within my own remit in terms of the estate, it's very much looking again in terms of the security aspects around that. In terms of artificial intelligence and the technical threats, within the department we have an information risk owners committee which very much looks at all the agencies in the areas that we affect. We also look at it from an NICS wide perspective and sit on those issues. It's fast moving, but that's why we put the specialisms, and that's why we have established how we deliver IT across all those major programs in the way we do, because it's important that we take best practice from what's happening in prisons, what's happening in courts, and making sure that we're using all of that skill to drive in terms of our IT strategy in that way. We also link very heavily into the shared services. So again, as a DOF, shared services who actually provide a lot of the IT stuff. So, but we're much more focused from a DOJ perspective in the design of those systems and supporting those systems and making sure those considerations are all considered, and then feeding back into effectively DOF to make sure that the appropriate security controls are in place. And I chair the Risk Information Assurance Committee for the NICS, which very much looks at the level below chair, which is really okay, it's secure, but let me go through the controls that are there and how robust are those controls. So that's a bit of work that I currently do on behalf of the NICS.
Okay, thanks very much. Nobody else has indicated, so you are free to go now. And just again, I'm sure we'll get you back individually or at some point collectively as well. So just thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, so just before, in terms of issues that were raised in that session, just to seek your agreement that the clerk writes to the department just to seek clarity on some of the issues raised, and then we'll update you then once we receive the correspondence. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thanks very much. We're going to move on to item 5 then, which is the SR 2023-138, the Coronavirus Act extension of provisions relating to live links in courts and tribunals. So refer members to page 109 to 129 of the pack. A member should refer to the Examiner of Statutory Rules first report of session 2023 to 24 on pages 130 to 194 of the meeting pack. Agenda items 7 to 17. Advise that the rule will extend the provisions in the Coronavirus Act which allow courts and statutory tribunals to receive evidence wholly or in part, and the use of audio or video links until the 24th of March 2024. To remind members that the committee noted at last week's meeting the Coronavirus Act 2020 powers had previously been used to extend these provisions on a number of occasions. So the committee has therefore asked the department for its view on whether the continuous use of such powers was proportionate or appropriate. Information on the department's plans to make the permanent provision for the use of audio and video links was also requested. The committee also agreed to postpone decision on the rule until the information was available. And again, just to advise members that the department's response is contained in pages 6 to 7 of the tabled pack. The department has advised that the Minister is satisfied there remains a clear role for the continued use of the provisions and to tackle the backlog of cases that have occurred during and since the pandemic period and may take up until 2028 to clear without extra resources. The department has also advised the Minister's intent to include provisions to cater for the wider use of live links as part of the NICTS Digital Modernisation Programme within the department's first bill, which it plans to introduce before the summer recess. So the reliance on the powers of the 2020 Act is therefore an interim arrangement as stated. So again, just to remind members that the statutory rules, the examiner to those rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the rule. And again, I'm going to ask if there are any comments or if you're content with the statutory rule. Justin, yeah.
Sorry, my hand was raised in relation to the previous item, Chair, so maybe we'll go back to the name. That's okay with me.
Sorry, Justin, could you say it broke up a bit there?
He's taking his hand.
His hand's down now. It was from his hand was still up.
It was up.
Oh, was that from earlier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, my screen froze. Yeah, my issue was, yeah, so I'll come back to it, Naomi, so forgive me, Chair.
Oh yes, no bother. Thank you. Okay, so nobody's any items. Are members then content with the statutory rule? And I'll put the question that the Committee for Justice considered SR 2023-138, the Coronavirus Act 2020, extension of provisions relating to live links for courts and tribunals, number 2 order Northern Ireland 2023, and recommends it be approved by the Assembly. Approved? Yep. Okay, thank you. Just to advise that the Chair will reflect the Committee's views in the plenary of the debate on the statutory rule. Moving on to item 8, SR 2022-123, Magistrate Courts Licensing Amendment Rules, Northern Ireland 2022. So again, to refer members to 196 to 212 of your meeting pack for the relevant papers, and advise you that the rule amends the Magistrate Courts Licensing Rules, Northern Ireland 1997, following amendments to the Licensing Northern Ireland Order 1996 by the Licensing and Regulation of Clubs Amendment Act, Northern Ireland 2021. It provides the procedure for specified premises to allow suitability order for underage functions and the procedure for those granted. Those orders do apply for authorisation to hold an underage function on a specified date. It also makes amendments consequential to the removal of the requirement for licensed premises to hold a children's certificate before under 18s are allowed in areas of licensed premises that contain a bar. The previous committee considered the proposal for the rule, which included other technical and consequential amendments that were not included in the rule. The department advises that those amendments were subsequently considered not to be necessary to enable the implementation of the relevant provisions of the Act. So again, the examiner of statutory rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the statutory rule. And just to advise members that the statutory period has expired and this rule therefore cannot be annulled. However, the committee can still scrutinise. So again, just to ask members if they're content with the statutory rule or any other information or clarification is required. Content?
I'm content, yeah.
Okay, so again, just to ask members to note SR 2022-123, the Magistrate Courts Licensing Amendment Rules, Northern Ireland 2022. Noted? Sorry, hopefully we'll be over these soon enough in the next week. Agenda item 9, SR 2022-148, the Police Service of Northern Ireland Amendment Regulations, and again refer you to pages 213 to 218. Advise you that the rule made provisions to change public holidays for the PSNI to reflect the UK Government's decision to move the last bank holiday in May 2022 from Monday the 30th to Thursday the 2nd of June, and to grant any additional holiday for Friday the 30th of June for the Queen's 70th anniversary as monarch. Again, to advise, the examiner of statutory rules drew attention to drafting errors and stated that she was content with the department's assurance and it would seek to correct those errors at the earliest opportunity. Again, to advise you that the statutory period has expired and therefore cannot be annulled. However, the committee can scrutinise, and just to seek if you're content with the statutory rule. Content. So again, just to ask members to note the SR 2022-129, the Police Service Northern Ireland Amendment Regulations 2022. Oh, noted. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 10, SR 2022-148, the Police Pensions Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022. Refer members to pages 220 to 229 of the PEC, and again that the rule amends the Police Pension Regulations Northern Ireland 2015 to ensure that the prospective part of the MacLeod judgment can be implemented by closing the Police Legacy Scheme on the 31st of March 2022 and moving all active police pension schemes members to the 2015 scheme on the 1st of April 2022. Again, just to remind you that at the meeting last week, the committee agreed it was content with the rule which implemented the retrospective part of the MacLeod judgment. And again, advise members that the examiner of statutory rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of this rule. So again, to advise the statutory period has expired and the rule therefore cannot be annulled. However, you can still scrutinise. So just to ask, are you content with the statutory rule? Yep. Content, thank you. And then just to put it formally, to ask you to note the SR 2022-148, the Police Pensions Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2022. Is that noted? Thank you. Agenda item 11, SR 2023-68, the Crown Court Amendment Rules, Northern Ireland 2023. So to refer members to pages 231 to 241. And again, that the statutory rule makes a number of amendments to the Crown Court rules in respect of overseas production orders that take account of amendments made in the Crime Overseas Production Orders Act 2019 by the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act 2022. Again, to advise you that the examiner of statutory rules raised no concerns regarding the technical aspects of the rule. And again, to advise you that the statutory period has expired and therefore cannot be annulled by the committee, but you can still scrutinise. Are you content with the statutory rule? Content, okay. And again, just to ask you to note the SR 2023-68, the Crown Court Amendment Rules, Northern Ireland 2023. Noted? Thank you. Agenda item 12 to 17, court fees. And just to inform you that we're going to consider SR 2023-164, SR 2023-165, SR 2023-166, SR 2023-167 and SR 2023-169 and SR 2023-170. And again, to put the question of each statutory rule separately. So I'll refer you to pages 243 to 387 to inform you that the rule increases the fees charged for the delivery of civil and family court business. An increase of 9% came into effect on the 1st of November 2023, and a further increase of 9% will be applied from the 1st of October 2024. Again, the department states that the Northern Ireland Court and Tribunal Service currently recovers around 80% of costs associated with running the civil and family courts. It has proceeded with the fee changes following the consultation as the most proportionate means for the courts to move towards full cost recovery. The department points out that the court fee exemption and remission policy protects access for those on low incomes and who can't afford to pay the court fees. And again, they will also continue to partially subsidise children and family cases and fully subsidise cases relating to domestic violence. So again, to inform members that the rule are not subject to assembly proceedings, but the committee can scrutinise. So again, I'm going to ask members if you're content with statutory rule 2023-164, the court jurisdiction non-contentious probate fees amendment order, Northern Ireland 2023. Agreed. Ask if you're content to note the SR 2023-165, the Enforcement Fees Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2023. Again, to ask if you're content to note the SR 2023-166, the County Court Fees Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2023. Thank you. Again, if you're content to note the SR 2023-167, the Family Proceedings Fees Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2023. Great, thank you. If you're content to note the SR 2023-169, the Court of Jurisdiction Fees Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2023. Noted. Yeah, thank you. Content to note the SR 2023-170, the Magistrate Court Fees Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2023. Noted. Thank you. And again, Agenda Item 18, SR 2023-235, the Offensive Weapons Act 2019, Commencement Number 1 Order, Northern Ireland 2022. Again, this is on pages 389 to 393 of your pack. And again, that the commencement order brings into force provisions in the Offensive Weapons Act 2019 relating to the offence of having a coercive substance in a public place. Again, to advise that the rule is not subject to assembly proceedings. And again, I'm just asking you if you're content to note SR 2022 number 235 C24 of the Offences Weapon Act 2019 Commencement Number 1 Order, Northern Ireland 2022. Noted. Thank you. Agenda items 19 to 21, the Justice Sexual Offences and Trafficking Victims 2022 Act Commencement Orders. Again, to advise you that you will take the 3 statutory rules at agenda item 19 to 21 together, refer you to pages 395 to 407, and that the 3 commencement orders bring a range of provisions in the Justice Sexual Offences and Trafficking Victims Act, Northern Ireland, into force. Again, to advise you that the rules aren't subject to any assembly proceedings. And again, I'm just going to ask if you're content in terms of SR 2023-87, C.6, the Justice Sexual Offences and Trafficking Victims and Commencement Order 2023, the SR 2023-142, C9, the Justice Sexual Offences and Trafficking Victims 2022 Act Commencement Order, Northern Ireland 2023, and the SR 2023-188, C11, the Justice Sexual Offences and Trafficking Victims 2022 Act Commencement Order, and the Northern Ireland 2023. Are you agreed? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 22, SL1, the Police Pensions Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2024. So again, to refer you to pages 409 to 429, and the Department is proposing to make a statutory rule to make amendments to the Royal Ulster Constabulary Pensions Regulations 1998 and the Police Pension Northern Ireland Regulations 2009, the Police Pension Regulations Northern Ireland 2015. Again, the rule will remove the risk of legal challenge for disability discrimination relating to ill health exclusion benefits and increase the employer contributions rate from 35% to 46.6%, and amend the 1998 regulations and 2009 regulations to align to the survivor forfeiture provisions with those in 2015 regulations, and correct minor drafting errors in the 2015 regulations. Again, the Department states that the police scheme here will be the first to remove the ill health and eligibility clause from the 1st of April 2024, though it understands that similar legislation is being considered in England and Wales. The majority of the public sector pension schemes will also make secondary legislation to amend the employer contribution provisions. And again, just to inform you that the increased employer contributions will result in pressures of 121 million for the PSNI over the 3-year period from April 2024, which will be considered obviously within the PSNI's budgetary planning going forward, and that the Department of Finance has informed the Department that HM Treasury has committed to providing funding for increases in employer contribution rates, which will be via the Barnett consequential process. So again, it's just to seek your views, members, on whether you're content with the proposal for the statutory rule to make amendments to the Royal Ulster Constabulary Pensions Regulations 1988, the Police Pension Northern Ireland Regulations 2009, and the Police Pensions Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, or if any further information or clarification is required. Are members content?
Content.
Yep.
Content, nearly there. Agenda item 23, so we're now looking at the forward work programme. And again, just to draw your attention to pages 10 to 16 and to inform you that dates on a number of sessions have had to change due to witness availability. And also the committee visit will now be to the Remote Evidence Centre in April, and that's really just because of the length of time that the previous visit would have taken. So again, just to see if members are content to note the document, unless there's any issues you would like to raise.
Nope. Content.
Noted. Okay, thank you. Correspondence then on agenda item 24. So just to inform you that there is a correspondence memo and 7 items of correspondence on pages 439 to 565 in the meeting pack. I would like to draw your attention to a number of these. Item 5, which is on pages 556 to 559 of the meeting pack, is from an organisation business in the community and includes an invitation from them to hold a committee meeting at Custom House following their CEO breakfast and a request to present to the committee. It also includes information on Ban the Box campaign, which relates to encouraging businesses to remove conviction tick box form from the first stage of a recruitment process. Again, I'm asking to seek members' agreement to note this item and to consider an informal meeting at a future date.
Yes. Noted.
Noted, thank you. Again, to draw your attention to item 6 on pages 560 to 561, and it's an invitation from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission to attend the 25th anniversary celebration. Again, just to seek your agreement to note and to advise that you can contact the Human Rights Commission directly if you wish to attend. Noted, thank you. Agenda item, sorry, let me see. Just to, are you content then, sorry, with the other items of correspondence set out in the memo? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 25, so just Chair's business. So really it was just to update you that I had met, I think it was Monday of this week, with the independent monitoring boards for the prisons here. It was a very quick meeting because I had to run down then to the chamber just to have a discussion. And I suppose they were just setting out some of the challenges that they have. There may be worthwhile as we get into the body of the committee in terms of looking at some of the issues, and particularly if we look at visits to the prison. Obviously we had the Criminal Justice Inspectorate last week in terms of some of the reports that they have published, looking at conditions and issues within the system. I suppose the independent monitoring boards would be in this, the prisons on a weekly basis. A large part of that organisation is based on volunteers, and there's obviously, like other sectors across society, there's huge issues within it in terms of the recruitment and the retention of volunteers. So that may be an area that members may wish to probe more into. There's also concerns, obviously, in terms of some of the conditions within the prison, and obviously that's linked to financial challenges, increase in demand within the system, issues that have been raised previously in this committee in terms of body scanners and isolation suites and stuff as well. So it was a very informative briefing from them, and again it's just to, we can either get like a written update or briefing, or again at some point in the future we can consider bringing the board in front of the committee just to have a more formal engagement as well. So just if you're content to note it at this point, and then we can raise it as part of the work programme going forward. Okay, thanks very much on that. And then the next item 26 is just any other business, so it's just to see if there's anything members would like to raise. Justin? Yeah.
Yes, Chair, thank you. If agreeable, could the committee write to Eileen Murphy, Chief Executive Officer of Women's Aid Armagh Down, and congratulate her and her Women's Aid team on such a powerfully positive conference yesterday, attended by hundreds of delegates. Really impactful, really informative, and be the change was the theme, and very important conference. I think it'll be positive for the Justice Committee to write to her and congratulate her on such a successful event, an important event.
Okay, thank you. Justin, are members content that we write?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, that's agreed. Thank you. Any other items under any other business? No. Okay. Agenda item 27. So just the date of the next meeting is the 7th of March at 2 o'clock in room 30. So we adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Committee Room 30, sound.